We are back when it's always game day in Cincinnati. Lindsay, Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Cincinnati Bengals, I wouldn't even say improve. They move to 4-8 on the season. Absolutely brutal game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike, I just feel like we have to start with the defensive side of the ball. I shouldn't be surprised. This is what they've been all season long. I even said after the game, I was disappointed after the Monday night football game at home when I saw the offense go out and try to do everything every drive, and the defense should be embarrassed. But here we are, eighth loss, and you look at the defensive side of the ball, and it's the same exact story. Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers haven't scored 40 points since November of 2018. Uh, Not great.
Mm-mm.
I and what Russell Wilson hasn't had a 400-yard game since 2019 in September. This was an all-time bad performance from them. 44 points given up. This is what the fourth. I think I saw a stat that this is their fourth time losing, despite scoring 33 or more points, which is the most in NFL history. You can make your excuses here and there for like, like they don't have the players, they don't have this, they don't have that. But when you get to historically bad, I think everybody just deserves blame. And it all culminated. The season ended on a third down where Justin Fields came in. And I think everybody, the game was at Paycor. I think everybody in that stadium said, oh, he's going to keep the ball here, right? Like, there's one thing that this guy's going to do. It's either they're going to run some type of read play, and he's probably going to keep the ball. That's the whole reason you're going to have him in there. Except the Bengals defense. They did not know that. And whether it was they did not have somebody assigned to Jackson, it looked like they probably did. Or the other one, which I think is what happened, the guys didn't perform another missed assignment, another critical missed assignment in a game to lose the game in week 13. It's December, and this still happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two happened there. And either way, I think that relates back to coaching. Either A, schematically, you did the dumbest thing possible and didn't have anybody in place for Justin Fields, or B, your coaching has been extremely inefficient at relaying your message and what you're trying to teach to these players. I think Josh Newton and maybe the safety as well were responsible for Justin on that play, and neither one even came close to making the play. The corner comes crashing down the line like he's part of the run fit. Not really. It's amazing. You get this late and this stuff still happens. And I mean, there's other issues in there too, like same issues we've always talked about. But I thought that play was like a microcosm of the entire defensive season where, oh yeah, just another critical missed assignment leading to an explosive play to lose a game. That is the MO. Like, yeah, the offense gave up some points there too with the interception, the 2 fumble, 1 return for a touchdown. At the end of the day, I don't think any other offense gets so criticized for scoring 38 points. And that's the crazy part to me is like, oh, they missed one opportunity. It's like, why? Every offense should be allowed to miss 3 opportunities, not one. Not one, and that decides the game. And like I said, they missed 3. They didn't convert on, 4 total opportunities. But insane that you've got one of the top 5 scoring offenses in the league, and you are now 4-8. The best you could do this season is win out and go 9-8, and probably not make the playoffs with that record. So I don't know where. If it was me, I think you're at the point where something's got to happen. Like, I don't think you can just leave this game, this defensive performance off of a bye week. And like the first half, they spent the entire time just sending those linebackers and everybody so deep in their zones right off the snap of the ball that Russell Wilson's his pass chart, 5 yards and under, that was like 80% of the passes he threw, and he threw for like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. All he did was just, when everybody vacated, just toss the ball underneath. Then they'd send some pressures. Well, what's another way to beat that? Short throw, underneath, not covered. And it's like, how do you not have an answer here? And like, yeah, Mike Hilton got beat in man coverage when they went that way, but I just feel like you need to have an answer that your players are able to perform in. There's just a floor that's just not evident with this defense. This is probably the lowest point, giving up 44 points to the Steelers, just because they haven't scored that much like ever. And it could have been worse. Like I think if they needed a touchdown, they were getting a touchdown on that drive where Fields slid. Like he probably could have ran that the whole way and scored 50. It's this defense tough, and if it was me, I think you have to let Lou go. Whatever has gone on this season has been a complete train wreck. Last year was like kind of bad. I think 22nd in points allowed, so it was disappointing. This year is a train wreck. This defense is a disaster.
I've said it before, if Joe Burrow wasn't having the season he was having, and it was just an overall collapse and it was a bad season, which we couldn't excuse that. That would be terrible for all parties involved. But you have Joe Burrow out there playing like the best player in football in the league, out of all of the positions right now at quarterback, number one, because you can look at the ratings every single week and he's number one in EPA and any of the QBR ratings. And that's absolutely impressive when he doesn't have an interior offensive line. And he still didn't have one today with Cody Ford out there. But going back to the defense right now, I agree with you. And this might be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it on here. And obviously, it's really easy to have a scapegoat and point to someone that you have to make the change. The season's over. They're even if they go 9-8, they're not making the playoffs, and nor should they. This defense doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs. It's absolutely brutal. It's over, and today was their opportunity to possibly go on some kind of streak, which I have no clue why I got any of my hopes up, because the defense is what it is. When someone tells you who they are the first time, you should believe them. They've told us who they were several times this season, and I still had that little bit of hope. Maybe it's because Lou Anarumo. Maybe it's because I thought, well, eventually it's going to break. They're going to be able to stop these teams, especially in offense and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was more nervous about their defense going into this game than their offense, and they couldn't do anything to stop them. They made it look so easy. But I agree with you. If you're going to be moving on from Lou Anarumo at the end of the season, just do it now. You have 5 games left. Send a message to your fan base right now and say, you know what? You're right. This isn't good enough. And yes, I know he doesn't have the superstars on defense, but you look around the league at other defenses, they're not historically this bad without playmakers and without superstars. The Bengals have invested a lot of draft capital into these players, and they have yet to develop them, and we continue to talk about that week after week. And to be honest with you, Lou Anarumo rarely had a good defense when he's been the defensive coordinator. He's had guys step up and make special plays in big moments in the postseason, and maybe one good year on the defensive side of the ball. It's time. It's time. And I'm not saying that it's going to help the defense in the next 5 games, and they have a lot of work to do. It is going to be a rebuild on the defensive side. You have no superstars that you can currently build around. They have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer. Some of the vets, you're going to have to pack up and go. But I at this moment, the Cincinnati Bengals should look at that performance at home. They've won 1 game at home this season, 2 more to be played there. And it wasn't good enough, and it was an embarrassment. So the front office should look at their team, their fan base, their quarterback, who talked to the media today and was very honest with where things are in the Cincinnati Bengals organization. And it felt like, hey, we're really going to find out, who's going to be here and who's not going to be here. And I think that's huge coming from Joe, and just being honest in his post game that you have to do it. But the thing is, I don't know. I could see them saying, you know what? We'll hang on with Lou the rest of the season. We'll make a move in the offseason. And I just don't understand it.
For me, it almost just becomes like I think I'll push back a little bit, because I do think Lou in 2021, 2022 was a good coordinator. I don't think it was just one good year and like his players stepping up. Like I think what he has done against some of the top quarterbacks when he plays them is extremely impressive. That leads me to my point of he's not a floor raiser at all. Like there is no floor with an Anarumo defense. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the reasoning is, or if it's just that it's too complicated for some of these guys or what. The floor doesn't exist, but the ceiling's awesome. And now he's never going to have, for whatever reason, he's never going to have like the number 1 defense. Like there's always stinkers somewhere. Mike White game. That actually reminded me the first half of the Mike White game, just in terms of, wow, Wilson, football looks so easy when you throw a 3-yard pass and the guy goes 10 yards, like repeatedly, and just not having an answer to fix that. That reminded me of that Mike White game. But I thought in 2021, 2022, he had good defenses, especially 22. And then the postseason really ramped it up, and he was awesome the entire time. Like he deserved a ring to be honest. Like when you got to the end of that, where what he did to Mahomes and what he did to the Rams offense too before that final touchdown drive, where Stafford was Stafford and they were able to score a touchdown, but still, what was it, 20 points or so from the Rams? It wasn't like they got shellacked in that game. He's always been able to put confident stuff on the field in the playoffs, and that's something you can't say about every defensive coordinator. I mean, just look at Jim Schwartz last year, where he just got pantsed by the Houston Texans in the first round, despite having the number one defense all year, like a record-setting defense, and then they're going in and giving up like 40 points to the Texans and couldn't find a stop. So I think I pushed back a little bit on that, but I also just point to, I think it might be time to let go, because you need a floor right now. What you need more than anything right now is a defensive coordinator that can come in and get them to play sound football. No matter who's out there, just play sound football. Look at what Brian Flores has done in the past. What he did with the Dolphins the year they were supposed to be so bad that people were ready to throw the 0-17, 0-16 parade before they stepped on the field, and he gets them competent. He makes that defense pretty good to watch, despite them giving up Minkah. It's kind of similar. Like they traded away a guy that he probably could have used in Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Steelers. And despite that, he's putting out a good defense. There's a lot of defenses out there that don't have a bunch of star pass rushers, but their blitzes and their pressures and everything that they do works a little better. And the last part is the reason that I think you kind of just have to let Lou go is he can't give up these players he loves. When Sam Hubbard hit the field, he was on the field for like the start of most drives, and it's nothing. He's doing nothing. He's doing nothing good. He's out there. I think he might have gotten a pressure, and that pressure, Wilson escaped and threw a touchdown. Like it wasn't a pressure that forced an incompletion. It wasn't a sack. It wasn't a quarterback hit. It was nothing like that. It was, he got kind of close, and then the quarterback threw a touchdown right around him. He makes life so easy, because that right tackle for the Steelers has been pretty rough this season. And he got to go against Hubbard, and he looked like an all-pro. And that I think he's the worst pass rushing starter in the entire NFL. And I don't think the interior guys do much for them either in terms of rushing the passer. Maybe BJ Hill a little bit. But it's just, I don't understand the Hubbard thing. And I knew that he was going to be out there a lot when they get down to the red zone. They get down to the goal line, and he starts coming in for a fullback package. Like they're still treating him like he's a star. It's like, and here comes Sam Hubbard, like it's prime JJ Watt coming in on offense. What was that? A loss of 4 when he came in there? And not that it was his fault. It was just insane what Cam Hayward did on that play, and terrible cut blocks from the offensive line. But yeah, I don't understand it. Like you have 2 guys who have been more productive than him, and you can't get them on the field. Myles Murphy hit the field. They put him in a 20-yard curl flat zone on the first play, which was no idea. And that was all game, that they were dropping those defensive ends 15 yards down the field to play zone coverage. But then the second play he's in there, he grabs Wilson and should have had a sack, but Wilson was able to underhand toss it at a tight end to get it be ruled an incomplete pass. And then I don't know how often he played after that. I think he played the next couple of snaps on that drive. After that, I don't think I could point to another time he played. And it's just, you don't know what you have. And at this point, if the season ended today, you would have to put edge as a huge need.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not even Murphy's terrible. It's, I have no idea what that guy does. And maybe he's so bad in practice that they can't get him on the field. But it doesn't seem like it. Because they don't talk, he's not getting Jermaine Burton, where it's like, they have to coddle him and do everything to make it seem like, Jermaine had a catch and whatever, like he's a kick returner. He's just playing a couple of special teams reps. He goes out there for one offensive snap. Like he's out there and he plays like a full series, but he just gets pulled. And it's just still bugged me. Like when they asked Anarumo, all he talked about was Osai. And it's like, okay, yeah, Osai has been playing better this season than he has in the past. But that shouldn't preclude you from taking away some Hubbard snaps. But that part didn't come up. There should be another positive PR piece for Sam Hubbard. There's every week he gets another
Twitter. One. Yeah, and this is nothing against the social media team or anything like that. They do a great job for what they're dealing with. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's always another thing about Sam Hubbard, what he's dealing with. And I agree with you. I look at, and I'm sorry I have to use the Kansas City Chiefs as an example, but I feel like it's the perfect franchise to look at if you want a good example. And it's George Karlaftis. He's out there. Guess when he was drafted? Same year, Miles Murphy, just a couple picks before him. And guess what? They're not afraid to use him. Not comparing him to Miles
They
Murphy.
and they let go of their edge rusher to give him more snaps for his second season. They had goodness, I can't think of his name. Frank Clark. They had Frank Clark, and Frank Clark was declining. He was a Chiefs
Legend.
loved him because of like what he did in the playoffs, and he not that he was a Chiefs legend. I don't know if I'd go
Well,
that far,
I shouldn't have
but
used legend, but he made you. I feel like you bring up a good point. In the playoffs, he made really big plays.
huge plays. He was their second best pass rusher for the first part of their Chiefs dynasty,
Yeah.
and now. And then they see they have Karlaftis, they let him go, and they're like, "We have a young guy, we need to play." It's kind of the same thing when they looked at Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu, aging, kind of falling off. They've got a young guy in Brian Cook, drafted. I think that might have been the same year Dax Hill was drafted. They let Matthew go so that they could play Cook. And it's like they know. Kind of the same thing when you're talking about like Charvarius Ward to L'Jarius Sneed to Trent McDuffie, where they can recognize when they have a young guy ready to take a step and they're able to create room for him and not create this log jam instead. That log jam has been an issue for them this year, man. It is. I don't know. It's tough to have any faith in this defensive staff because who have they developed too? I think you look at that and your best example of a player that they have developed is probably the guy that they forced at playing safety, said he was a safety, made him play safety for 3 years or 2 years.
Now he has a torn ACL.
Torn ACL. Then he finally moves to corner, and now he has a torn ACL. And like we've talked about repeatedly, you have no idea what he is. Like, yeah, he was pretty good for a couple of games, but he tore his ACL. And now you're like, do I take the fifth-year option? You have to decide that this year. And the answer is going to be no.
No.
And
Cam Taylor Britt.
if he's a good corner, but you can't take that risk, I think. So that's exactly the path Murphy's heading on. If he has a good year 3, you don't know. You don't know what it is. And maybe you just draft a guy in the first round and restart this process at edge, or maybe you go pay Chase Young or something and have somebody who is a fine edge rusher that should get more pressure than Sam Hubbard. But to me, when I'm just frustrated by all of this. In Newton this game, I think showed you why he was a 5th round pick. He was pretty rough the entire game. Game Taylor Britt up and down, but at least there were ups.
Yeah.
So I'm looking around because what I'm thinking of this is this team on paper isn't going to get so much better this offseason that they're a contender next year just by adding players. What you need is improvement. You would need Murphy to take a step. You would need for Cam Taylor Britt to get back on the good side of things. You would need one of these other corners to step up and take that job. You would need Jordan Battle probably to play better. And just all these guys need to, Jenkins and Jackson, just all these guys need to take steps on this defense for them to get better. But at the moment, I don't know if I trust this coaching staff to make any of them better. They just don't seem to be in the business of, developing their players. They seem to be in the business of trying to put the best defense on the field, but the best defense they can muster is a team that gives up 44 points to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the first time since 2018 again. So two presidents cycles ago. It's been a while.
And it was against the Bengals. So it's just like one of those things. And I just look, this team has 5 games left. And I think the thing that you take away from watching them in this game after a bye, losing a game like that on the defensive side of the ball, and I could say offensive side too, it is all about development. It's who's going to be here. And I think Joe Burrow said it perfectly in his post-game press conference. You're really going to find out who's going to be here going forward and who's not. You're going to put a lot of things on tape. And I think this team, I kind of felt like it needed a mini rebuild, but defensively, I wouldn't even call it mini. It's pretty large. And that could come from a new defensive coordinator, secondary coaches. I think all of that's important. Defensive line coach. We'll see where that leads after 5 games. But when you have Joe Burrow playing the way he's playing, and this is what he has to play near perfect in games. And I know a lot of people want to flip sides and say, well, Joe, he fumbled the ball and he did this in the game. I'm sorry. I see the offensive line he's dealing with, and Orlando Brown Jr. is obviously coming off an injury. Interior is brutal. They made a switch. They had to put their interior so bad that they had to have Cody Ford out there as an interior starter. That's how bad it is. So I'm not trying to make excuses for Joe Burrow, but when this man has pretty much put up insane numbers every single game that he's had to do this season, and they're still 4-8, it's really hard for me to be in the corner of blame Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think when you just look at that in general, like, do I blame the defense that gave up 40 points? 37 maybe, if you want to, be very nice about it. Or do I blame the offense that scored 38 points? I think I know where I go with that question. So it's tough, and Burrow has to basically be perfect. The offense basically has to be perfect. I think the offense has actually shown that they have developed players. I think that's the one part of this, is that I think T. Higgins is a better player than he was when he was a rookie in college. I think Jamar Chase is definitely a better player than he was in college, and I think he's a better player than he was as a rookie. I think he's more nuanced as a route runner. I think that all makes sense. I mean, I think Yossi Voss came in pretty raw from an FCS school, an Ivy League school, who was more of a decathlete or heptathlete, whatever that one was, multiple sport athlete, track and field, than he was a wide receiver. And I thought he's developed pretty well. Another low red zone touchdown today for him. I think Burrow, another guy, like, you look at him and he's developed a lot over the course of his career. The offensive line.
What can you do?
I mean, Bolton's better than he was, in college, and especially in pass protection. But I don't know what that means for just in general. So, like, maybe that part you look at and go like, I don't know. But yeah, I look at the offense. I've seen guys develop. I can't really point to guys on the defense besides somebody who changed positions. So where I am is just I want to watch just to see where guys are and if they improve. If you can give a guy more, basically just give snaps to these young guys, and let's see what we have for next season, because this season's gone, and that is sad. You're playing for pride. You're playing for stats, accolades, whatever, glory. But you're not playing for the playoffs. You're not playing for a Super Bowl at this point. I would be very surprised if they ended up getting somewhere around there. Maybe they won't be favored in these games anymore because they have an awesome quarterback. And I think the last point I just want to make is watching T. Higgins in this game. It's incredible that they're going to let this guy walk for nothing. Like, it just feels like they dug their heels in the sand. T. Higgins has shown them that they are wrong this season, besides missing some time. Like, every game he's been awesome. I know the drops this game, but 2 drops, one ball fell off his hand that was pretty far out of reach, but he was pretty awesome in this game. And I watched that and I go, can you imagine like another wide receiver trying to play like this, where they put everything on Jamar Chase and they said, Joey Porter Jr., go cover T. Higgins. T. Higgins then had a great game, had a touchdown, had some yards, had some catches, and drew 5 penalty flags against Joey Porter Jr.
They were all worth it. They were all worth it.
Watching that game, real penalties. They weren't.
There was actually one they didn't call right before they called it. It was right in my end zone. I'm like, that should have been a penalty before. Then they called it. But no, I see where you're at with T. Higgins. I'm just living in the reality of I know what's going to happen. Yeah. So I don't waste any more on it. I just don't, because I just know.
You have so much cap room. You have so much cap room, but you like extending Chase. You still have so much cap room.
They do.
Like, well, who could you extend? Who else could you extend on this
team?
They're
gonna bring Trey Smith here. They're gonna bring Trey Smith.
Trey Smith, yeah, that's fine. They have enough money to bring in Trey Smith and pay T. Like, that's where I'm lost. And like, cut Rankins, cut Hubbard, cut Stone, and you save $30 more million. Like,
there's a lot of guys I'm okay with saying goodbye to on the defensive side. Honestly, there's probably only 1 or 2 that I'm like, yeah, please bring back. And that says a lot for when you flip to that side. And it's gonna be a very tough offseason for this front office. Not that I feel sorry for them. I mean, they got a lot of work to do because it's absolutely brutal. And you're right. They have the money not to get too far into offseason because we have 5 games, and I'm sure we'll talk plenty of offseason in between where the Cincinnati Bengals are, because there's not a good outlook for January. But it's a disappointment. It's absolutely embarrassing. I keep reliving these games over because it's just incredible the way Joe Burrow's playing. If you look at the NFL product as a whole, it's one of the best offenses in the league. And it's just really disappointing because the defense can't stop someone. Can't stop Russell Wilson, making him look like an all-star out there. And it's just absolutely brutal. But this is where they're at. And the reality's here. The season is a wrap. It's not a wrap technically because they have 5 games that we're going to have to watch, but it's really just about who's out there and who's going to be back on the roster in 2025. And I think we have a lot of those answers, and it's just if the front office is going to make those moves.
Yeah, where we're at is the season is all but officially over. They just need to finish shoveling the dirt over top of the carcass, and that stinks to waste an MVP caliber quarterback who having an MVP caliber season. It does remind me a lot of, I guess, the 2007 Bengals would be one example with Carson Palmer, but I think Burrow's better than Palmer. So I think of those early 2010s New Orleans Saints where that defense was so bad they would go 8-8, 7-9, something like that. And that team is so much better than that. And they could go out there and compete with the best of them, but that defense loses you games, and there's more to playing football than just quarterbacks. It's not just quarterback versus quarterback because Bengals would have won some games. That was the case.
They would have won all but maybe a 2 if that was the case. And I'll even give, a split between the Baltimore Ravens because Lamar Jackson is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But yeah, it's brutal. But that's where they're at this season. And honestly, the only thing that I can really hope for the rest of the way is health for your players. You want these guys to stay healthy because I know fans are going to say, sit Joe Burrow, don't play him. Joe Burrow is not going to sit. He's going to play as many games as he's going to be allowed to play. But if it's getting towards the last game of the season and there's no reason for him to be out there, I do pray that he does not take the field and he can go into this offseason healthy. That is really the only thing I'm watching the rest of the way. Just health on the team. Guys stay healthy and develop. We'll see what these younger guys have. They're not afraid to play other guys. Hopefully they'll play Myles Murphy more just to see. I'm not saying he's better, but I like you said, I have no clue what he is. I have no clue what he is on this defense. And next time we record will be Tuesday, so we'll see if there's any changes that evening by this time Tuesday. I'm not really expecting any, but I think that was a pretty embarrassing home loss and should be a reality for the front office to be determined if anything happens. Mike, will you have anything on Bengals talk?
I'll probably try to figure something out, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing exciting to write about.
You're right. Maybe Lou Anarumo's time here.
The past.
Lou Anarumo's resume in Cincinnati. What has happened? We'll see. We'll see what happens, but make sure you follow Mike. He'll have a good breakdown of the game over on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at Alan Diaz Patterson. We'll be back. Thank you as always for still listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.